Well, welcome everybody to today's IAPC&M CPD and Business Building Masterclass. My name is Julie Kennedy, based in sunny the Netherlands, as I was saying, and I am your host. Today in the hot seat, we have Peter Scott and Pierre Dussault, who will hopefully manage to get on in a minute. Two fabulous specialists in one go. I think we are very privileged. So hello, Peter, and hopefully Pierre will join us in a second. I will start just very rapidly, forgive me for some housekeeping. So our call today is a maximum of 1 hour. That's 45 minutes masterclass and then 15 minutes room for Q&A. The session is recorded, so please mute yourself, but keep your video on so the speaker can see that they're not talking to themselves. And please use the chat box for questions and suggestions, and we will take the questions at the end. So a short intro. You will find a lot more because there is so much to be said about these two speakers today. Peter Scott is a computer scientist with a parallel career in human development specialized in artificial intelligence and the author of 2 books. Actually, his newest release, I will be interviewing him on later this week. So do watch our author's series blog as well. And a very interesting fact, I thought, that it was his daughters, aged then 8 and 12, who inspired him to overcome his Asperger's syndrome and become a public speaker. So there's a lot of hope for all of us there. Now, Pierre, who will be joining us, hopefully, Pierre Dussault is a leadership management consultant, also passionate about the evolution of human beings and technology. And there is so much to be said on that topic. So there we are. I see Pierre is there. I shall invite him in. So welcome to you both. Welcome, Pierre. Sorry, we're dropping you straight in at the hot end. Our topic today, robot-proof yourself and your clients, which I find personally both fascinating and absolutely terrifying. So sit back or sit forward even, take notes and learn. Over to you, Peter. Are you still there? Peter?
Thank you so much, Julie. And Dawn, wherever you are, and Pierre, welcome, and everyone, thank you for coming to this. We've got a lot to cover. We'll get right to it. And so we're going to be talking about technology, and it may seem, let's just call out the elephant in the room here. What does this have to do with coaches, right? We are all about people. That seems like a dynamic, a profession, a skill that has not changed in 1,000 years. So why bother? Why should this be important? Shouldn't we just leave it to engineers and get on with what we've always done? And we will explain that there is a huge change coming. We can all feel it, right? You have the sense of that there is a huge changes coming from technology, but so few of us have some idea of what that's about. Pierre and I, with our backgrounds as both engineers and coaches, can marry that together. And we started this work because we realized that it was time for technology and coaching to come together. And we have developed a framework by which you can help clients become resilient to the change that's coming from technological development, which will accelerate to the point where it outstrips our ability to adapt to it. So we're in the perfect timing for dealing with that. As you can see here by our putting in the Johari window at the bottom of the slide here, this is occupying that space of the things that we don't usually know, the unknown unknown. We're going to try and illuminate that space for you today. Pierre will give you a little introduction to who we are.
Thank you, Peter, and welcome to all members of your Professional Coaching Association. It is a great honor for us to be invited by your association. So Peter and I are both passionate about the evolution of technology and its impact on human evolution. We have a similar background. We are engineers who became coaches because we understood many years ago that the human side of evolution is more important than the technological side of evolution. And you will understand all along this presentation why we are focusing on the intersection of human and technological evolution. We have given many conferences on that topic, especially in California and for many chapters of the ICF around the world. As you have seen on those pictures, we were featured at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena and at the University of California as well. So today we will talk about the importance of using frameworks that will help you adapt and thrive in those challenging times. Now, on that slide, you see, if you look at technological evolution and how it impacts people, in the last few years, we have seen many new technologies who have influenced a lot the human evolution. So for instance, regarding social media, researchers have discovered that since 2015, there is a generation that has been really impacted negatively by this technology. So all the people born after 1997, they have discovered after 2015 that there was a big spike in depression, suicidal rate and stuff like that, because when teenagers arrive in their teenage years, they need a lot of recognition, and social media has exacerbated a lot this need for recognition. Also, if we look at, for instance, at the COVID crisis, which was another big disruption, but not driven by technology, we can see that people are not really prepared for big disruptions. So let's go to the next slide, please, Peter.
So we're going to ground this in a hypothetical client here. We've embodied the kind of person that you might be dealing with here in what we call Sharon, 56 years old, Human Resources Director. Let's use her as a hypothetical example. She's not ready to retire. She thinks she's got a shot at being CEO. You've been working with her for a while. When she was an undergraduate, computer technology was punch cards. And she knows that that has outstripped her, but that wasn't what she was trying to keep up with. But she knows that there are seismic changes coming on the horizon. She can feel it, just like we all can. She just doesn't know what they're going to look like when they arrive, but consequently, she feels afraid of becoming irrelevant. She doesn't know whether those changes are going to obsolete some of the things that she does for a living that define her value to the company, but she doesn't know what to do about it. She's been working with you to save middle managers for themselves, you know, the people that the organization wants to keep, but they've got some flaw that is preventing them from realizing their full potential. That's how you've been engaged with Sharon. So what can you do next? Because as much as we've talked about the obvious problems of this technology, the opportunities that it brings are as great or greater. And those are opportunities for Sharon. But why is it that she feels disempowered? And it's because the unknown. It's because of that Johari window corner. It's because of what she doesn't know that she doesn't know. And we are used to dealing with the unknown. Sometimes we have fun with it, right? You go backpacking in the Andes or up the Amazon, unless you've been exactly the same place before, then there are surprises ahead. But that's why you're going, right? To have those surprises. And that's the zest. That's what you get out of it. You are seeking those surprises. We have had surprises in the last 2.5 years called COVID-19. Not as much fun, right? Why is that? Well, the difference is our choice. And I sum it up in this saying: exploration is when you visit the unknown, and disruption is when the unknown visits you. The difference between those is agency. Do you have a choice? And when you do have the choice, then it becomes like backpacking in the Andes. It becomes fun, something that you can play with. And so our work is about helping people like Sharon and you find agency at a time when a great amount of unknown is looming on the horizon from technology. The people that have the choice and the agency in that are the people running the tech companies and the ones that are creating that change. But unless that's you, you're being taken for a ride like everyone else. And those people are saying, look, I don't know where we're going, but it's going to be fun, right? Doesn't feel that way when you're not the one in the driver's seat. So what can you do to start the ball rolling with Sharon? Well, start a conversation for possibility about the future. Ask her, what sort of changes do you see coming to your industry? Do you feel your staff are adequately prepared for disruptive change? We all have an experience of disruption thanks to COVID. We know what global disruption looks like in one form. Do you feel adequately prepared to help them? These are questions that will open up whatever insecurities and fears Sharon has about change and position you to be able to take her somewhere. So where is she at the moment? So what is these are questions to ask yourself, to ask her, what's the difference for her between exploring and being disrupted? That's a question that can expose where she feels powerless or where she has control. What are the fears that she has for the future, and how is she ensuring that she remains relevant? Now, it wouldn't be a coaching conversation at the moment that we're having together if we didn't pull a coaching trick and turn that around on you and say, well, ask yourself this: what's the difference for you between exploring and being disrupted? What are your fears for the future? And how are you ensuring that you remain relevant? See, until you've experienced these things yourself, there is a part of what you can do for Sharon missing. So it is important in our work for us to bring this home to the coach as well as the people that they're coaching. So how is this a problem for Sharon at the moment? Well, she knows that she should be more prepared. She just doesn't know how. She feels insecure and threatened. Even if her position is insecure, even if her position is secure, her reactions impair her performance. She lives in a world, in an ecology that is experiencing greater and greater threats, fears, and disruption due to technology. So you can't isolate yourself from that. And Sharon is bombarded, as we all are, from all sides by the implicit and explicit fears and doubts and questions about the unknown. So what is she lacking in her competencies? And the answer is she doesn't have a framework for addressing disruption. And that's where we come in, because we do. And here's Pierre to talk about that.
Thanks, Peter. So Peter just told you that there is a huge change underway, and Sharon must be asking herself, how will I be able to face this level of disruption? How will I react and act when I will be visited by the unknown? Well, we are here to help you prepare, adapt, and thrive to face what we call the fourth industrial revolution. This is the big change that is underway. More details to come about that later. But now let me introduce you to what we have designed to help you with your individual clients. Next slide, please. But what exactly are we trying to accomplish by introducing this Ripple framework? This slide shows you what we are trying to accomplish. We are trying to accomplish those things for our individual clients, but it's also a framework that you can use for yourself. Next slide, please. As mentioned before, we are both engineers who have worked for many years in the technology sector, and eventually we became coaches, so we have integrated the world of technology, science, engineering, and all the fields that are not considered in the ladder, such as psychology, anthropology, sociology, and so on, in order to develop coaching models that are more inclusive of all the important things that should be considered for individual and organization. So basically what we have done, if I can quote very humbly Sir Isaac Newton, if we have seen further, it is by resting on the shoulder of giants. So this coaching model can be used not only to coach your individual clients, but it can also help you devise your own development plan. So RIPPLE stands for Reveal Fears, Identity Discovery, Purpose Discovery, Prejudice or Bias Discovery, Learning, and so on. Unfortunately, we cannot explain all the letters in the framework, but fortunately, we have an 18-hour course that does just that. So let me cover just one of them, Identity Discovery. As you know, getting to know yourself is very important. I think in the history of humanity, we have been talking about that for almost 2,500 years. The first people to talk about that were the great Greek philosophers. One of them said, know thyself and you will know the gods and the universe. And in the 1700s, one of the founding fathers of the United States, Benjamin Franklin, said, the three hardest things in life are steel, diamonds, and self-knowledge. And in the 20th century, the great psychologist Carl Jung said, until you render the unconscious conscious, you will call it destiny and it will run your life. So basically, this is one of the things that we are doing in this RIPPLE framework. Next slide, please.
And so we have assessments at different stages in here. And you can see that the framework involves putting together a lot of things that you've already heard of and other people have developed. And the original part of our work lies not in the vertical columns, but in the gaps between them. We have arranged these tools in such a way that we can assess people's resilience to technological change. We can tell them and we can help them understand what they need to know about technological change in order to not be afraid of it. And we can take them through these 6 steps to becoming resilient or anti-fragile, as we will talk about later, to get there. Familiar process, but it's been optimized in this case specifically for dealing with the impact of technology. So we'll look at, just as Pierre was saying, one of those verticals for right now, the only one that we could reasonably fit in something like this, which is identity discovery, identifying their, or discovering their own identity, because people can get, the psychological term is enmeshed with what they do. Like, I'm an accountant. I've been an accountant all my life. That's what I do. I'm very good at it. And, but then what happens when that job goes away? What happens when something automates that whole sector? And so our purpose there is to help them find a deeper identity than what it is that they do, and to find a mission that is greater than that job description. The leadership circle profile can be used to help them evolve in this respect. We use that. And what we would do at this point is also with you, ask you, well, what's your identity as a coach? It's funny. You'd think that would be something we would answer or know all the time, be intimately familiar with. When we ask audiences that, a lot of the time, the most common answer is, no one ever asked me that, or I haven't thought about that. So again, we want you to walk a mile. We want you to walk a mile in these shoes before you ask the client to try them on. And so the RIPPLE model is the individual coaching process that takes people through these steps to becoming more resilient. But if they're part of an organization, if you're coaching them for a business purpose, the rest of that organization needs to move as well, or it will drag them back to where they were. That's just inertia. So we're going to talk about the kind of team coaching, group coaching, executive leadership coaching that can facilitate moving the company, the organization, to adapt as well. And of course, we have an example about that, Pierre.
Yes, so in the history of humanity, there are many companies who were at the top of their industry, but unfortunately, they failed to go through disruption and to evolve as the technology was evolving. And one great example of that, you might have heard about it, it's Kodak. So Kodak, one of their engineers, one of their teams developed the digital camera. But when it was presented to the executive, they said, we are not in the business of digital cameras. We are in the business of making films. So they couldn't see the disruption that was coming. And eventually Kodak went bankrupt in 2012. It was a company who was making $12,000 billion per year. Unfortunately, they went down. Next slide, please. Another great example is Nokia. So Nokia, before the advent of the iPhone, it was the biggest cell phone company. And they were really slow to change when the new telephones came in and they had the digital, you could use your touch screen and stuff like that. So they were really slow and eventually they were eliminated. Next slide, please.
And so here you see the impact on Kodak's share price from the introduction of the iPhone. And so we're examining here how the identity of an organization impacts its very survival. And we can see this played out in headlines like this, which was doing the rounds a lot in 2014, when one of several surveys said that a large number of jobs were expected to be automated within 20 years. There are a number of studies, as I said, about this. They have disagreeing conclusions, unsurprisingly. Even if they're all wrong, then this is still the environment that Sharon and we are living in. This is what we have to mentally deal with. And so part of what we tackle is, well, what's realistic about that? How do you evaluate these claims and how do you tell which ones could apply to you or your clients? This is typical of the sort of thing that comes out of consultancies. Yes, we're actually in 2022 now, and it would be time to reassess and see how well a job they did. I'm sure they're posting the same kind of thing about 2025 now. And it shows the sort of rate at which we're expected to reskill, to re-educate ourselves. So what do we do with Sharon? What kind of company is she at? Ask her to assess with the skills that you've given her, how resilient her company is. What are her options? Is she at another Kodak? Can she tell that now? Can she get them to listen to her? How can she protect her position, or should she just go somewhere else? Or is she at a Nokia? Is it something that she can rescue? In these situations, can she now, as someone who is proactive, who is exploring rather than being disrupted, make a name for herself as a thought leader in her company or even in the industry? By understanding dynamics such as this, for years now, businesses have sought to reduce the amount of creativity their employees are required to exercise. It's not totally universal, of course, but you can see this in not only places like fast food restaurants where everyone's got to follow a script, or customer service agents, but also in high-end engineering type firms where there's more and more policies and procedures manuals. Did you ever hear of one of those getting smaller? But at the same time, we are deliberately increasing the creativity that our machines are capable of. That is active research. There are billions of dollars being spent on it. We should not be surprised that in some industry where those curves intersect, the machines then end up doing the jobs of the people. This is something that's important to assess. One of the studies that's been done about that that's quite good is the assessment by Kai-Fu Lee. And this is copied from his book, AI Superpowers, where he breaks down jobs along two axes. The vertical one at the bottom is talking about jobs that require little human interaction or meaningful human contact, and at the top, the other way around. On the horizontal axis, on the left, we have optimization-based jobs, jobs that involve running the same process over and over again so you can practice getting good at it, and that's what differentiates you from the competition. And on the right, it's creative jobs. Well, of course, this forms a quadrant. And on the bottom left, you have jobs that involve little significant human contact and repeating the same process. So we've got telemarketer, even radiologist. These are jobs we've heard about being automated by AI, right? On the top left, we have what's called the human veneer. There is some significant human contact, but it's actually repeating the same process over and over again, which is ripe for automation. Well, like wedding planner, right? They've got spreadsheets. So it's going to have the same questions for every client. Do you want doves or swans? You know, they'll fill in the blanks and optimize their jobs that way. The value that they're providing is being able to talk down a bride off the ledge when she's frantic on the day, right? But that veneer is, as it implies, thin. Now in the bottom right, you have what's called slow creep. It doesn't have a lot of deep human contact because it may be solo, like a writer or an artist, but it is creative. And what we're finding is that artificial intelligence is getting better at being creative. So this is where there is a slow creep of AI into this field. And of course, that leaves the top right, the quadrant that you'd like to be in, and we as coaches are. He didn't have coaches on his quadrant, but I put us in there. And these are the jobs that involve creative human contact. They are the safest for right now, and helping Sharon understand, well, where does she fall on this is obviously helpful. The process that we follow here in taking people through Ripple is essentially climbing this ladder of resilience. So it's going to look quite familiar. That they start out in a place of being unconscious. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know how vulnerable they are to disruption and technological evolution. So the first stage is to provide a shock that gets them out of that and shows them what is possible. We have found that we're quite good at that. Also, we have inadvertently left a lot of audiences in the next stage, maybe because we ran out of time, but they're paralyzed because they know there's something they need to do, but they don't know what. So we introduce awareness, and then you can see the rest of the stages here as we work our way up to mastery over technological disruption. And so what we do with a organization is called the change model, and Pierre will describe that.
Thank you, Peter. So let's talk about our organizational coaching model. So Peter and I, we felt the need to develop a framework for organization after devising our ladder of resilience, which was just explained to you by Peter. So basically, if you go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is the process. This is what we are trying to achieve with our clients. First of all, is to help them realize the awareness of the environment, the situation they are in. And when we work in organization, we try to create champions and alliances, try to identify what are the proper people who will be there to help with the changes. We are trying to create a future-proof culture, on which I will elaborate a little bit more later. We work on the vision, mission, and values. It's very critical. Finally, we adopt success matrix, and all of this is done in order to reinvent the future. Next slide, please. So the acronym for our organizational model is change. So the first thing is about comprehending disruption. Second one, hiring change agents. Third one, anti-fragility. Fourth one, new vision. The G stands for generate KPI based on velocity, and the last one is about evolving. So basically, as I told you before, we have an 18-hour course that covers that. But let me talk to you a little bit about anti-fragility. I don't know if you have ever heard about this term, but we hear a lot about resilience nowadays. People tell that we need to be really resilient, but resilience in physics is when something is bent and it will come back to its natural state. And anti-fragility is about gaining from disorder. So when you are disrupted, if you just go back to your previous state, you might not be able to gain from that disruption. So that term was coined by Nassim Taleb, a former trader on Wall Street. He wrote 5 books about very interesting topics. It's called the Inserto series. I suggest you read that, it's very important. And anti-fragility for human beings, I think we have seen a lot of great examples in history. For instance, if you look at a person like Nelson Mandela, who has spent 27 years in prison, he was isolated, he was even tortured. And when he came up, he was very, very strong, and it changed the fate of South Africa. And other examples have been studied by science. For instance, the POWs of the Vietnam War. After the 571 POWs came back from Vietnam, the psychologists and psychiatrists expected to see people who would have been completely destroyed, but they realized that only 4% of them suffered from PTSD, while 30% of the combat force who fought on the ground suffered from PTSD. So they were really surprised, and they studied that. And after that, they created the Jim Stockdale Institute of Leadership for the American Navy. And they realized that those people, they were able to become anti-fragile, despite some of them were being jailed for 8 years, up to 8 years. They were tortured, isolated, but they had great leadership, they had a vision, and they had a mission. So these things made them go through all these hardships. So that's just an example of what we cover in the change model. Next slide, please.
And if we had the time, we would go through the last one here in more detail. Having established all of the context for this discussion to work, you then, as the last stage, ask the organization, put everything on the table, which means reconsidering everything, including your identity, and introspect. What do you need to take care of so that this question can be opened up within the organization? And we would invite some brainstorming from you. Well, what does that mean for business? How would you lead that discussion? And our input is, you take them to the highest altitude of perspective. Why are you doing this? Who are you? Who are your customers? And these purpose-driven questions. And really what we're doing is refocusing them from a business perspective to a coaching perspective, which is the sort of thing we wanted to do all along with our clients, right? And this is what we live for. But they're stuck in looking at the things that produce these short-term transactional outcomes. But this work provides the incentive, the motivation to switch over to this coaching perspective. We actually have here, we present the tools with which you can help an organization understand that its survival is going to depend upon a coaching perspective because of the disruption wrought by the fourth industrial revolution. Pierre?
Yes, so basically that huge change that is underway is the fourth industrial revolution. So as you know, the first industrial revolution took place in England in the 1700s. So what is an industrial revolution? An industrial revolution happens when there are 3 or 4 general purpose technologies who emerge and converge at the same time. And a general purpose technology is a technology that basically transforms everything. So in the history of the world so far, we have had 3 industrial revolutions. We have had the information age. And just think about how this simple technology changed the world, or the automobile changed the world. So the fourth industrial revolution, this term was coined by the World Economic Forum in 2016. And now we have 10 to 12 technologies, general purpose technologies that are emerging and converging at the same time. So you can imagine that the transformation in disruption that will take place in this decade will be overwhelming. So you must have heard probably about all those technologies that you could see on the screen. And a good example of that is Tesla. You know, for many years, many people said electrical vehicles are not the future and so on. But eventually we saw in 2020 that the stock price of Tesla went through the roof. So basically Tesla is worth more than all other car companies. And this is a good example of how these technologies emerge and converge. Next slide, please. Next thing. Okay, so this is what we call the hockey stick effect. So for us Canadians, you know, we are very familiar with hockey. So as you can see, the shape of a hockey stick, at the beginning of the shape, the slope is very, there is not a big slope, and suddenly it goes like exponentially. So this is a phenomenon that has been studied a lot in economy. And this is basically how the technologies emerge. Next slide, please.
Okay, I'm going to do some catching up here to get back on time. So about in respect of artificial intelligence as one of those technologies and the biggest driver, about half the population knows that they don't know enough about it and feels that's a problem and doesn't trust it or thinks it should be limited. And that is something that we address through and also talking about the sort of developments that are going to occur. I'm going to have to skip past this one to stay on time. But now let's look to see where Sharon is left at the end of our journey with her. She understands the impact of artificial intelligence and these other transformational technologies, what it can't do as well, and when and how fast these things are likely to happen. She's no longer afraid or confused. She creates a new position of greater leadership for herself and uses that learning and knowledge now to position herself as the company expert on disruption and future technological developments, which is what you might expect or hope for from an HR director. And she's grateful to you for taking her on that journey. We would also at this point, again, bring it back to you for a discussion about, well, where is this going to impact you? Because AI is coming to coaching as well in the form of systems that not going to replace you, but can augment what you do. And where do you stand with respect to using those, given that other coaches are going to be doing that? And so at this point, we would say, well, what do you need to revisit? We've seen Sharon. Sharon stepped up to the plate. What do you need to revisit? What beliefs do you need to challenge? How do you find the unknown unknowns in your career? So our conclusion is the fourth industrial revolution will utterly transform the world. And you can survive through it, that's the resilience, or you can thrive through it, that's the anti-fragility. Or you could do neither, and your clients and a great many people will, of course, do neither. By the time that disruption becomes obvious, it's going to be too late to prepare for it. That's pretty clear that we are like that. Exhibit A would be climate change, right? We wait for it to become obvious, too late to stop. So your clients are going to need guidance and empathy through this, and that's your main job. They need to be as resourceful as possible. And when you're being assaulted by the unknown, then you don't have all your resources at your command. So you want to be able to tackle this with every ability that you have operating at its peak potential, so that you can help people like Sharon do the same thing. I'll just leave this up here while we go on for questions. If you want to find out more, you can email us, stick that code in for a 20% discount, and we will tell you more about the that and the schedule for it. But now it's time for questions.
Well, look, I mean, first of all, thank you very much. I mean, I wasn't sure what exactly to expect, and I must say I find it, first of all, extremely clever how you've mixed the technology and the human side in there, because I don't know, people like me tend to separate both. You know, you've got the coaching, which is all about what's driving us and our passions and our limitations, etc., and then the tech, which is something, you know, with lots of ones and zeros that I don't really get. And to put them both together like that, I thought was extremely clever. I find it extremely reassuring, because I think there is, you know, there is nowhere where this does not impact us. And as you said also, you know, what we don't understand, we're scared of. And I think the first step is indeed understanding. And you give us with this model something very concrete, very practical, but also very humane to make our way through it. And turning the question back on us. Well, certainly I've written a few notes for myself of things that I do need to talk about within coaching, within my world as well. But let's go back to the questions. So let me see. We have some here. I mean, feel free to ask them. We're a small group. I mean, a small group on the Zoom, not on the Facebook Live. But if anybody wants to ask, Marianne, would you like to ask your own question? Or do you want me to just read it?
Thank you very much. It's actually already been answered. I just asked about references, and yes, and somebody has said, yes, you do have references. So I'd be really interested to have a look at them. Thank you. Maybe I've just taken, Peter, your email address. If I email you, would you be able to give me the references?
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions in there? I mean, well, what, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, you have your course, and I would say for anybody listening out there, you know, who wants to take this as a learning point and something which is going to be of tremendous value for a lot of people. I mean, it sounds like a very good investment to me, seeing what we can do, you know, as coaches to help ourselves, those around us, the companies around us, cope with this. Because I mean, personally, I think there is nothing more scary than the unknown. I think that's what worries us the most. When we know we can cope, well, fine, you know, we'll find a way to cope, but it's just suddenly everything is changing very fast, and it just everything's shifting. And I think COVID was a big wake-up call, as you said, for lots of us, that our entire world and way of living and doing business can turn on its head in 2 days' time. So, I mean, apart from your course, right, and you've given us lots of things, what were the 3 things you would say we really need, every single one of us, to pay heed to?
Thank you for mentioning. I will, by the way, just interject that we are accredited by the ICF, for anyone who's a member of that, for the 18 units of continuing education. And lists like that always go to my engineer's mind, is like, oh, okay, well, we're going to have to write a paper on this. So I have to engage a right brain kind of way of answering that. But number one is, well, let's not order them. you need to understand that we're not engineered to, we're not built as humans to appreciate, to intuitively understand exponential change, not on the scale that it's happening now. So by the time it becomes apparent, it is too late. And you can see this in things like COVID. So you can see exponential change happening there. So it's important to understand your own limitations, because our human limitations are perhaps the biggest barrier to success through this kind of era. And while you can't overcome those, you can't exceed those limitations, by being aware of them, you can work around them. So just being aware that there are areas we're not going to be able to compete with AI, but knowing what those are allows us to develop. And I think that all of the lessons would come down to one form of that: knowing ourselves, knowing what makes us unique, what makes us human, and what and how to leverage that in the face of the changes that are happening. Pierre, would you have anything to add?
I would like to add something. You know, Winston Churchill during World War II, he said, "If you are going through hell, keep going." And I think that we have had many examples in the past decades about people who have gone through hell. One example actually is the president of Ukraine. Mandela is such a great example, and I mentioned you the POWs from the Vietnam War. It's something that is not known a lot, but reading about those people, what they have gone through, and I think we all have those qualities, you know, but you don't know until you are there. So reading about those inspiring stories, I think is really important, because we all go through hell at one more point or another. You know, we will all lose people, we will all face tragedies and stuff like that. So there is a way to prepare for that, you know. Some people have written about that. We hear more and more about post-traumatic growth instead of post-traumatic PTSD. So a lot of research has been done. There are things we can do about it. So a few decades ago, they began to talk about PTSD, and people thought there was nothing you could do about it, but psychology has evolved. Some people have gone through it. They have written books. So this is our human side that will help us go through all these hardships.
And Pierre used a key word there, prepare, because I get asked for predictions a lot. And the prediction I can be safe in making is that predictions are going to be increasingly useless, that we're entering an era of more and more disruption, and predictions become less and less useful. But it's what we try to make, right? I mean, think back to the beginning, March 2020. What were we predicting? That toilet paper would be short, that we would need disinfectant in large quantities. People stockpiled this stuff. Well, turned out that wasn't the thing that we needed. They were wrong. And then we tried planning, and not to knock planning too much, but no plan survives contact with the enemy, right? So you've got to be adaptable, that it's preparation that will be that will enable us to be the most anti-fragile. And what is it you prepare? You prepare yourself. You prepare yourself to be the kind of person that can handle anything.
Thank you.
So basically, in our framework, we are trying to cover, we have looked at what is available out there, all the new tools and stuff like that. So we try to bring everything together. So we provide a training that will help coaches as much as possible to face these kinds of disruptions.
And I guess for you two, this is going to be something which you also have to continuously revisit, right? As technology and our evolution and how we react to these two change together. I mean, something that I know I'm really going to stay with me. I mean, the idea about the difference, exploration or disruption, you can see any sort of change in whichever way. It's a mindset as well, right? The same with your idea of anti-fragility. I do personally use the word resilience a lot, meaning you bounce back, but you're right. You don't bounce back. The idea is that you bounce higher, right? That you've learned from it. And I think those examples that you were giving of people like Nelson Mandela, and I mean, in my head, I had Viktor Frankl, that how you take something horrific which has happened to you and you actually make it into your purpose. There is a meaning in it, which means that you can, that you're growing through the horror instead of being a victim to AI. And I think that's what we're all frightened of, is that we become, blocked in some sort of matrix where we have nothing to say anymore, and some sort of higher power there, decides things for us, and that we lose our human side, that everything is automated indeed. So you have given me a lot of hope, I must say. Are there anybody else have a question? Jeremy, anything you would like to ask?
The Marion's hand is up.
Probably far more questions than we've got time
as well. Yeah.
Marion got her hand up. Marion's hand was up before me. Let's be polite. Marion, you go first. We know each other well enough. On you go.
No, I was just really curious about how you are pitching this to companies and how they are reacting, and whether they are, are they aware of this, or what's the reaction that you get when you pitch this to companies?
Well, that is the hard part, is it's always been for coaches, right, to open up new markets, and we don't open up a new market just by scaring the pants off someone. We've discovered that we're quite good at scaring the pants off people, but unless there's an existing relationship, that's not going to get them through the door. Which is why we are approaching coaches, because we believe that that has the amplification effect for you to, we can amplify our work. Instead of working with one company, we can work with we can propagate that work out to as many companies as there are clients of coaches that we reach. And that having that existing relationship with a company is something that enables you to ask those questions, those deep questions. You don't meet someone at a cocktail party and say, what's your identity and your work, and what's your greatest fear for the next 5 years? You've got to start from a place of an existing relationship, and then it will get somewhere. So there is this difference between what we do on stage and how much that's the shock value, as it were, and then what can we do with people that we have already in a relationship with, because then they will trust us, and that's where we want our coaches to think about who they can work with, that they can leverage that relationship.
Thank you.
The questions I had, because I spent 30 years helping organizations achieve considerable change, and part of the need for that is to have the leadership willing to adapt from their way of doing things, and the other half of the coin is to have their people beginning to think, rather than just carrying on doing what they've always done because no one ever listened to them before. But if you have an organization where the leadership is prepared to listen to their people, you can then generate great creativity. So I was intrigued at the front, say a lot of creativity is needed in people. That absolutely shakes me, because I spent 30 years helping organizations recognize if they got creativity from their people, they would achieve great things and unimaginable things, and things that they never even dreamt was going to work before, and they come up with them, and off they go, and they transform the organizations. and had the adaptability ready to change the organization. So one of my questions was, in this training that you do, are you teaching coaches how to develop the people in an organization? Or are you teaching coaches to work with individuals in an organization?
Well, it's both. Those are the two different models. The Ripple model is about working with an individual to become resilient, and that will work. That applies wherever they are, whatever they're doing. But an organization is an ecosystem, and so you can have the world's greatest flower, but if it's not getting watered, if it's not in the right flower bed, it's not going to survive. It needs to be transplanted. So that's where the change model comes in, about how does the organization become the place where those individuals can make the greatest contribution, and the organization itself can survive. And one of the things we've done is we can present the value proposition of this work as being not simply the optional extra, because we know that when money's tight, the first thing to go is the coaching budget, the training budget, right? But to say that your organization will be like Kodak or Nokia. If you don't do this, you will be blindsided by a change you don't understand, and your survival you will cease to survive as an organization. That we invert Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that if you're not understanding this, you're not going to make it.
And the culture of the organization we found was critical. There were some cultures that were not willing to change, in which case we were going to waste our time trying to help them, basically. You needed the constructive cultures, or if they were defensive cultures, they were probably doomed anyway, more so in this day and age than even back then. So really interesting stuff. Thank you.
Exactly.
Indeed, we're arriving at the end of our hour. So I would like, if there are no further questions for now, to thank you both very much. May I suggest that you put your special offer in the chat box underneath or something, so that I can share it as well, the special offer that you had on your slide, or send me the slide as you wish, so that we have your special offer to share it with the others out there. Thank you for sharing your time. I mean, I know you're in Vancouver. I don't know, Pierre, where you are. Is that a French friend, or is it a Canadian French accent? I do realize a little bit of an accent là.
City, Canada.
Ah, bah oui, voilà, okay, Kaba. Well, wonderful having you with us today. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening in. Those of you listening, wherever you're listening, don't forget, now is the point to put your CPD, log it, because otherwise the chances are big you'll forget it. What have you learned? What are you going to change? When are you going to start? Thank you very, very much, and have a lovely evening or morning wherever you are in the world, and join us again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.